Hello viewers, welcome to my channel. Today happens to be the 2nd of May and it happens to be the birth anniversary of legendary filmmaker Satyajit Ray. Ray during his lifetime, apart from making movies, wrote a number of stories both long and short. A few days back, or rather few months back, I came across one story of his which was the first ever published story of Satyajit Ray. It was published in the Amrita Bazar Patrika way back in 1940s, early 1940s, when Ray was around 20 or 21 years. The story is titled Shades of Grey, and in this particular video I am going to narrate that particular story. Hope you like it.
Now let's begin with the story. I emerged from the musty obscurity of the second-hand bookshop and came out on the street, carrying my acquisition under my arm. It was one of those gloomy, oppressive August evenings which weigh down on a person like a heavy load. But there was an unmistakable jauntiness in my steps as I walked homewards. I noticed, too, that the slight touch of the doldrums I had the day before had vanished. And why not? It was one of my luckier evenings, and my frantic search in the dusty shelves of the bookshop was rewarded with a find, which would make any connoisseur's mouth water.
It was a rare French treatise on Chinese ceramics, a magnificent tome, superbly illustrated, and a ridiculous price I paid for it. It made me wonder whether these booksellers ever care to know just what they are selling. Musing on the prospects of a fortnight's interesting study, I took the usual turning near the post office. I was preoccupied and walked as preoccupied people are prone to do, with my eyes on the pavement. It was a sixth sense, perhaps, which prompted me to look up. I looked up and saw a few years ahead of me a strange man walking with the pace of a crippled tortoise. On looking more carefully, I had the feeling that he might not be so strange after all. In fact, he had a slouch which vividly recalled a very close friend of mine whom I had lost touch with since a decade. I strode up close enough to have a glance at his features and verify my suspicions. Yes, it was my long-lost friend, strangely, pathetically transformed, but still recognizable. I touched him on his shoulder and he turned to me, startled. My God, what a change! He looked a shadow, a mere spectre of his old self. He was apparently too moved for words, and so was I. There was a cafe nearby and I dragged him into it. We chose a table in one of the dimmer and quieter corners and seated ourselves in silence. Over a cup of tea, I threw my mind back to the past. We were at school together and at college. It was our mutual interest in art which brought us so close together. Even while at college, he had a remarkable flair for daubing paints on canvases and turning out masterpieces one after another. I was the critic, keen, fearless and impartial, weighing every picture of his with all the precision I could command and setting forth my frank views on them. He was a colorist par excellence, a wizard with pigments. It was wonderful the way he smeared paints on a canvas, seemingly with an utter disregard for final effects. It always made the finished thing look like a phenomenon. But, and it is a significant but, like all progressive young intellectuals of the modern age, he was a leftist. A leftist, that is, in his paintings, a fact which made him an outcast from the circle of those cozy conservatives in his line. It was only natural that it should have been so, and he ignored the fact altogether. And it was only too well known to me how he loathed anything which smacked of the academy. His views on art, progressive as they were, found an echo in me, for I was a down and out modern myself. I could see and appreciate a vital mind that was behind all his paintings. I remembered that he had once held a public exhibition of his paintings, which had ended up in a miserable fiasco, disillusioning him forever as to the heights to which the level of public intelligence was capable of rising. Thenceforth, the venue of his exhibitions had been his own studio, and they were essentially a one spectator, one critic affair, I myself working in both the capacities. It was not such a bad life the two of us led with our respective artistic métiers, complementing each other. In his case, the question of earning money hardly arose, for his father had been a businessman of repute and had left him a considerable amount of money which gave him enough rope to carry on art for art's sake without having to bother about how best to use it for money-making purposes. For my own part, I managed shortly after graduation to get the post of librarian in my own alma mater, an unfamous occupation which nevertheless did not stand in the way of my pursuit of art. During the years which I had spent in close touch with him, I had watched him mature with an astonishing rapidity. He had revealed such unmistakable signs of consummate genius that I was only waiting for the time when he would suddenly, inevitably leap into fame as one of the most versatile minds in the world of modern art. I could clearly see that it was not far off, but I was wrong. I was very wrong. Some unforeseen thing happened which caused us to drift apart, taking him to some remote region which was far, far away from fame, from his art, from humanity. It started in mere pleasantry. On a very cold January evening 10 years ago, I had gone over to his flat for our usual evening causure. It was not customary for him to work in the evenings. His myopia stood in the way. But that evening he seemed to be particularly absorbed in splashing colors on a fairly large size canvas. So absorbed, in fact, he was quite unaware of my arrival. I was intrigued and approached the easel from his back. What I saw on the canvas roused my curiosity to a degree. A magnificent figure of a woman, one of those spacious exotic type, was being painted with the exuberance of a Renoir. He was evidently putting all his passion into his work. I hemmed significantly and asked him who that sinuous senorita was supposed to be. Was she a creature of his own imagination, or did she exist in reality? He turned to me and smiled a slow, enigmatic smile, which revealed a lot more than spoken words would have done.
With a little more sounding, I got the story out of him. I had never imagined that my friend was susceptible to the softer emotions. But I was evidently wrong. It seemed that the very first sight he had of this woman had caused him to totter dangerously. But as he had made no efforts at recovering himself, he was now completely out of depth. I had found it rather funny at first, and told him so. I could not bring myself to believe that he could fall for a woman who was little more than an obvious man-trap. But there it was. And it was far more serious than I thought. A week later, I received a hurriedly written note which said that they were married the previous day and were heading for one of those obscure tropic isles. He promised right from there. But the promised letter never came. Instead of it came a shocking bit of news in the form of an obituary notice in the newspaper. It recorded the death of my friend's wife, drowned while swimming. I wondered what might have happened to my friend. I had conviction that he would come back home and to his senses. But with the passage of years, it dwindled into nothingness, and once more I gave myself up to the study of art, this time alone. And here he was back to his old place, a sad, somber, emaciated ghost of his former self. I had never known that he had loved his wife so much that her death could bring such a tragic transformation. I watched him as he sipped his tea. All the vivacity, vitality of his former self seemed to have been squeezed forcibly out of him. He really looked no better than a middle-aged thistle rake, although he was hardly more than 35. It was hard to start a conversation under the circumstances, but I spoke first, asking him when he had arrived. "This morning," he replied, in a soulless voice. Was he putting up at his former place? No, the same cold mechanical tone. His condition, it seemed, was anything but satisfactory. He had no money. What little he had was spent on his journey back. He had been starving the whole day, had no home, and no idea where he was going to spend the night. So I brought him along with me to my flat, as if I could do any less for one who had once been my closest friend. Even while staying with me, he continued to be the same brooding, lifeless man as I found him. He slept little, ate even less, and spoke on rare occasions, with one object in view, that of bringing him back to his normal self. I placed all my art treasures at his complete disposal. But the very mention of art brought an expression of such intense resentment on his face that I had soon to give up hope, leaving it to time to heal things. The great temptation for a final effort at revitalizing my friend came to me one evening. Art had been pushed to the background for some time past, owing to an unusual pressure of work in the library. It was a chance glance at a poster which brought it forcibly back to my mind. The gallery, true to its tradition, was holding an exhibition of French paintings from season onwards. The past came back rushing to me, the time when the two of us would spend hours in the gallery, feasting on the glorious masterpieces which adorned their walls annually. Even after he had left me, I had gone to their exhibition every year, but somehow I was never able to enjoy it quite as thoroughly as I did when I used to have him with me, adding his voice to my excited eulogies. I found him sitting on an easy chair, staring vacantly at the ceiling, his legs stretched out in front of him and his arms dangling limply by his sides. I blurted out the news without unnecessary overtures. "The gallery has done it again," I announced, hoping to see some signs of enlightenment. "Eh?" he said, looking at me still vacantly. I made myself a little more explicit. "There's an exhibition on at a gallery. Late 19th and 20th century French stuff. If you want the details, it's the usual annual affair. Don't you remember?" "Exhibition?" he questioned dubiously. There was a far-away look in his eyes, as if he was trying to collect scattered memories. It was incredible that he should forget about it all. I told him so. "Don't tell me you have managed to forget all about those exciting hours we spent in the gallery. Don't you remember that Matisse odalisque you went into raptures over? In any case," I added with an air of finality, "you are coming with me tomorrow in the afternoon. It will be the least crowded then." We were standing in front of a masterly Seurat. The subtle, almost scientific precision of his color harmonies reminded me of the intricate harmonies of music. I was so absorbed in the galaxy of great paintings around me that I hardly paid any attention to my friend. I was literally struck dumb by the extravagance of masterpieces. But a glorious season loosened my tongue, and I burst into rapturous praise of it. I wonder how long I dwelled on its merits. It struck me suddenly that my friend had not spoken a single word since we entered the hall. I turned towards him, and the expression on his face froze the eulogistic torrent in my mouth. I had never seen a man look more a picture of stark tragedy than he did now. I feared that he might collapse any moment, so pale and ghastly did he look. Holding him by the hand, I gently led him to the gate and out into the street. It was approaching evening, and the vast masses of cumuli in the sky were bathed in an unearthly orange glow. I had no idea we were inside the hall so long. "Are you ill?" I asked, You are not looking well at all." He faced me, looking straight into my eyes for the first time since he came back, and then he spoke. "I must tell you all," he said, and his voice was grave and ominous. "I had no wish to, but I can't stand the strain any longer." He paused and drew in a deep breath. "It is not my wife's death, as you may imagine, that has brought the change in me. Oh, she was a wretched woman. No, it is not her death at all, for that was a good riddance. It was the thing which came after it." He paused again and seemed to be making a violent effort. "One fine morning," he went on, "not long after her death, I woke up from sleep and found myself looking at a strange world. Everything around me had a strangely monotonous and mouldy appearance. I jumped up from bed and looked at the mirror. My face was looking pale and bleached. I had a terrible fear that I was losing my eyesight. Trembling in mortal terror, I ran to the physician. He saw me, saw my eyes, and put me questions. And do you know what he told me? Do you know? He said I was not going blind. No, no. It was not so bad as all that, but I was going color blind. Imagine, I, whose language was color, was going color blind. Do you think I was too weak because I crumpled down under my fate? Myself, I am amazed that I did not take my own life. Perhaps I love it too dearly, or I may be a coward. For what is life to me? What is art? What are Cezanne and Matisse and Renoir to a man who sees no other hue than grey, dull, drab, appealing shades of grey?